Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a video closing out on a few mouse pads, just my thoughts and impressions on a lot of pads that came out towards the end of 2025. This is probably going to be the last mousepad video of the year, but I want to start with the return from Midori. This is the glass pad variant, and it's one of my favorite glass pads on the market. I like that they are going for an uncoated approach, and it just makes the pad, the glass, feel a little bit more raw. It is 500 by 500, and the reason I like it so much is really because of the artwork. I love all the different variations of colors that work very well together, but I like the fact that it's not just another anime head zoomed in and following the other companies that are selling limited releases of that type of design. Nothing against anime. I love it. It's just I have so many of them that it's just getting a little bit repetitive. Now, the Midori, the return, actually does have a lot of the new features. It has beveled edges. It's actually quite thin. And because it is uncoated, it just has like kind of a little bit more of a raw nature to it. You can get a little bit faster on it with certain skates, but the U9 does make it a little bit more of like a balance leaning towards speed, which I actually do appreciate, mixed with the raw feel of the pad itself. You can see the razor green looking absolutely beautiful with the pad. I will say, though, the cloth variant, to me, the cloth variant was not my favorite just because it is a little bit too thick and a little bit too plush. So think X-Soft kind of on a little bit even more so than something like Artisan. It's just very easy to dig into. So if you're using dots, it makes it something that you are ultimately going to, with any bit of downward pressure, feel a little bit of that resistance. To me, that just makes it not something that I would use personally because I'm just primarily using dots because I'm sticking to glass and cloth like kind of 50% of the time. But the surface itself actually does feel good. It's a good textile, but because that base is so easy to give way as you are moving left and right as well, I do feel like it's almost like stretching as well. So the base to me just doesn't really work, but the textile itself is not so bad. It's kind of like a smoother Tang Dao variant. It actually does feel pretty good. I just wish the base was more firm. Both pads coming in at 500 by 500, and again, the design is absolutely beautiful. But with glass, again, the same caveat applies when you do compare this to other new glass pads on the market, like the new wallhack SP005. The same glass caveat still applies. So the wallhack SP005 is a exceptionally good pad. It's the same thing as the SP004, I believe, in terms of the surface, but they have all the upgrades of the VA. So you've got the beveled edges, it's a little bit thinner. It just feels very good. And I do think that the SP005 is a better surface personally than the VA. I like it a lot more. But when you compare the two surfaces, again, the return, one of the biggest features is that it's supposed to be uncoated. And I don't quite know if there is no chemical treatment at all because my hand just does not stick to this pad at all. So it's very good to the skin as well in terms of being anti-stick. But when you compare it to the SP005 with the U9 skates, I will say, like, the speed is really not that far off. I almost feel dynamic to be a little bit more controlled than the SP005 in terms of general feel and speed. But when you really start, like, getting down to, like, the minute kind of smaller movements, you do feel as though there is, like, a bit of this, like, silky slickness to the SP, whereas the return just feels a little bit more raw. Both of these pads are definitely like the top of the top glass pads in terms of my top 5. And although the SP005 is using like kind of, again, that zoomed in anime head type theme and aesthetic, the detail here is just absolutely phenomenal. And if you like those black and whites, the SP005, I think, is a phenomenal pad, and it's still one of the top-tier glass surfaces in general. Again, just so many elements here that just look so good in the SP005 that I could easily recommend both the return and this new limited SP005. Both of them look phenomenal. Really just depends on the aesthetic you're going for. And my performance on both, I can perform just as good on either of these pads. It's, again, just a little bit more of a different feel, where sometimes you get that slickness, and other time, and mostly you just feel this like raw texture on your skates that I really do enjoy with the return, and it does add a little bit of uniqueness in the glass market. But again, with glass, everything is within similar percentages. But they've done a phenomenal job with the return. Now, I also have 2 new pads from Esptiger. Esptiger, they always bring these really awesome designs that you just don't see a lot anywhere else. And these particular pads, I think, are only about $35. So, like, they're not all that expensive compared to a lot of these smaller companies that are charging a whole heck load of a lot more, which is understandable because sometimes unit prices are a little bit higher if you can only get 500 as opposed to selling thousands and thousands. But the Kingsui 2 and the Yasheng V2, I believe, or no, the Kingsui 3 on my right and the Yasheng V2 on my left. Personally speaking, like the only thing I don't like about these pads are the bases. They just move too easy on my countertop. But in general, I do like the surface feel of both of these. Again, kind of like an old school feeling surface. The smoother variant on the Kingsui 3, the Yasheng having a bit more texture to me, at least on my 2 copies. I do think that the speeds are a bit similar in terms of general feel, but I do think the softness has a bit more balance here on the right. The softness is something that is very plush as well, so if you're using dots, again, it is very easy to dig into both of these pads, but not as much as the thick return in the cloth variant. Between these 2 pads, the one that I've just found myself playing better on is, in fact, the Pioneer Talisman pad, the Yasheng V2, and it, I think, looks absolutely awesome on my desk. It is a nice, balanced experience. I feel it has a bit more speed in comparison to the all-black variant, and it is something that just feels great in-game in terms of a performer. I do find, like, the more full-size skates, like the new Cairo skates from Esptiger, do feel better than dots, and it is something I can perform very, very well on. So 2 very interesting pads. Again, a little bit more texture on the Yasheng V2, and I've already discussed the Pioneer Talisman pad, so you guys can go back and look at that video in terms of the general performance, but I actually think it performs pretty damn well, especially at $35. I have the Gravis here, and like the best selling point of this pad is definitely the base. It's got this kind of mirrored finish. It's very sticky on the desk and offers some good plushness as well. Again, kind of like an X-Soft variant, but in terms of the actual textile here itself, I think this is one of the worst mouse pads of 2025 that I've tested. I think it is worse than the Rocket Jump Ninja pad that came out a long time ago, the Control variant. This is just like an absolute mud pad, and one that does not perform well at all because it just constantly feels like there is massive amounts of magnetism on my skates. It's even worse with more full-size skates like the Cairo skates. Just not a fun experience at all. It just feels like I'm constantly moving against something in any which direction. And it's just kind of funny seeing how highly people have been talking about these T-Evolution pads. I would not recommend the Surface for gaming at all. Now, their Axis pad, this is their balanced variant. This is a bit of a different story. So it really depends on the skates that you're using on this, but the Axis can be a lot faster with some dots, and it can be a bit more balanced with more full-size skates like the Cairo skates again. But in general, like, this is just not really a pad that I'm enjoying either in terms of my general performance. I do feel like with some skates, the speed differs from a horizontal glide as well as a diagonal glide. And it is different on every skate that I've tried. Like dots horizontally compared to diagonally, it just feels slower horizontally. And then with the U9 skates, kind of the opposite, interestingly enough. So it's just a pad that I just don't find there to be some great consistency with any direction that I am gliding. Sometimes, obviously, with horizontal swipes, I kind of want them to feel consistent in speed. The dynamic friction, I want it to feel consistent no matter which way I am going. And it just doesn't when you are comparing the horizontal glide with the diagonal glide or the vertical glide. So it's an interesting pad. The surface textile itself feels new-ish. It's kind of like Key 83 feeling from Artisan. It's just not nearly as quality. And you can see, like, when you are lifting up the base a little bit, how the foam is kind of pushing into itself. That's something that over time I think will have some issues in general quality as well. So for me, the T Evolution pads are just a miss. I would not recommend these just to my community. I just think that these are not really the direction that you should go. And for the price that you're paying, you can pay a little bit more for Artisan. So it's just a miss for me in general. And speaking of pricing, like this is a fine example from Tenta-X of just a really nicely priced pad. This is their Shinrai pad, and it is edgeless, and I find like their quality here to actually be quite good. The base is great. It does stay stuck to my desk just as good as those designs on the backing that we see from T Evolution. But this is actually a pretty interesting pad. I'm trying to recall what it kind of reminds me of in terms of the texture itself. But it's not a smooth textile. It's got a little bit more of a hairy feeling to it. Not that it's like abrasive. It's just got kind of like a texture to it that's more even highly grainy than something like a Saturn. But I do find this to be a good pad. Like in terms of consistency from X and Y, it does feel fairly consistent, and you can pick up a lot of speed moving to certain dots. When you move to more full-size skates, they advertise this as a control pad, and with, again, more full-size skates, I feel like it's like not really like fully control, but think like balance leaning towards control. So there is some good diversity that you can get out of this pad, but like overall, the softness, it feels more like definitely like a soft from Artisan, kind of leaning towards like mid category. But it does take a bit more to dig into this than something like the Esports Tiger pads. It does feel kind of unique in comparison to a lot of the textiles on the market. And again, for $35 with a actual good edgeless design, it is a pretty nice balanced pad with, again, some good diversity. Now, last but not least, I do have the Cascade next to the Saturn Pro. And the reason I have it next to the Saturn Pro is because it's a comparable pad. You might have something like the Cascade already in your lineup, but it is a little bit different than the Saturn Pro. When I am running my fingers against the Saturn Pro, it feels a bit more textured than the Cascade. The Cascade ultimately feels a little bit smoother, both vertically and horizontally. The Cascade is a great feeling pad in terms of its foam density. I think they've done a very good job. And probably out of the cloth pads in this video, I think the best foam density in comparison to everything we've just seen. The Cascade is pretty close to the Saturn Pro foam density I have here in soft, but I would say maybe ever so slightly a tiny, tiny bit firmer. The cloth, again, is more smooth, and it's very consistent, both X and Y and diagonally. So in terms of performance, I'm getting an equal experience to what I get out of the Saturn Pro, but the big thing is it feels ever so slightly a bit faster with some skates and a bit less texture feel on some skates as well. If you like that Saturn-esque experience, I think you're going to like the experience you would get here with the Cascade. But again, it's a similar, comparable experience. So if you already own a Saturn Pro and you're happy with it, would I recommend you cross over? No. But if this is like your main type of pad and you're looking for something that is similar and you want a little bit more smoothness, you like the design of the Mizu Cascade, I would absolutely recommend it. In terms of my own personal performance out of all the cloth pads in this video, this would be the best. But again, right now, would I recommend paying $50 for it? It depends what's in your arsenal. And again, if you like the design, but I think they did I think Godspeed did a tremendous job here on his first pad, and what more of a example to use and try to improve upon than the Saturn Pro. So I think that's what he was aiming for. I think that's what he did. Would I be able to recommend it? Absolutely. So as always, guys, there are a ton of pads on the market that are exceptionally good, and there are a ton of pads that are quite similar to one another. I think I've done recently what a lot of people have done, and I've gone back to some of the top Artisan pads. I've never tried an Atsu V2, and I'm in the process of testing that right now, and so far it feels phenomenal. And going back to Artisan, I truly recall why Artisan is and should be still on top in a lot of categories. Not all categories. There's still some things that I think some pads do improve upon and should have some very significant recognition, but Artisan is still pumping out some of the best of the best, and hopefully we see new pads from Artisan moving into the future. That is it, though, guys, for this one, and kind of where I am in my pad experience and what's on my desk. I'm still swapping between some of the Artisan cloth pads as well as some of the glass pads in this video. The two main pads that sit on my desk right now are the Return and the new SP005. So take that for what it is. But that is it for this one, guys. I hope it helped. If it did, please leave a sub to the channel. See you guys in the next review. Peace.